Hello, and welcome to Doctor Who 50 Years Ago, the show that looks back to the episode that aired in 1967 and looks at the differences between then and now. This week, episode 2 of The Evil of the Daleks, When Whittaker Goes Victorian. I am Ben.
I am Luke.
And I'm Nick.
And here we are, and here we go into the news from 1967. Firstly, the Six-Day War segment. On Tuesday, the 23rd of May, Jordan broke diplomatic relations with neighbouring Syria, the well-recognised sign that war will soon take place. Yes, the Six-Day War is continuing to knock on the door of the Middle East for the next few weeks. Here's the further escalation.
I thought Jordan, Syria, and Egypt were all on the same side, and it was against Israel.
It all goes a bit nuts. I think it ends up being land grabby for everybody in particular. Only Israel is sort of bigger and better and grabs a lot more land than everybody else.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's quite a mess. There's more of that to come, but firstly, on Thursday, the 25th of May, North Korea's President Kim Il-sung delivers a speech to ideologists with instructions which created the personality cult around the president, pushing the country further down the road of authoritarian dictatorship.
Which is where we are still today.
Mm-hmm.
It's to the point that North Korea has their own calendar that's based on when he was born, and he's basically treated as a god because he's the eternal president of North Korea, even though he's dead.
Yeah, it's quite the catatonic state.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically an absolute monarchy, pretty much now. The sons of Kim Il-sung are like the representative of the god Kim Il-sung. It's quite disturbing, really.
Yeah. North Korea loves doing those kind of disturbing things, as you can see nowadays.
What I find interesting about this is that even though North Korea is shrouded in secrecy, we in the West can point down to the specific day that he delivered that specific speech to say, make me into a god, you propaganda losers, and make me good. I mean, how do we even know this?
Well, because... Well, presumably there would have been, I don't know, reporters of the state-run newspaper that would have put it out at the time, and then we in the West would know about it just because we didn't have ambassadors and whatnot there to just pick up this information. And then over time, this might have been, like 1984, sort of, suddenly this never happened. Oh. And that was always the case. But because we don't live we have a free source of information, we know that this happened.
Mm.
And the Soviets would have heard about this, and the North Korea was allied with the Soviet Union, and then when the Soviet Union fell, we'd have gotten a lot of declassified information from there as well.
Back on Friday the 26th of May, President Nasser of that there Egypt declares he's ready to destroy Israel, and both sides prepare for war over the weekend, whilst President Johnson requests restraint to prevent a possible Soviet intervention in the Middle East because the Cold War wants to get involved in absolutely everything.
Yeah, this is just further confirming the point I made about this whole conflict becoming this whole conflict becoming a proxy war for God's sakes.
My dear boy.
Further to the point I was making last week, the Six-Day War accelerates the process of Israel and its conflict with its Arab neighbours in becoming a proxy conflict in the Cold War.
Yes, with backings from the two aggressors in the Cold War to various affiliated nations.
Yes, to the point where Israel is now still a very firm American ally, and in fact, really the only country on earth that, full-heartedly supports Israel now. I'd say pretty much every other country doesn't really 100% agree with Israel on everything anymore.
Mm. Insert present-day US-Israel relations. Mm.
Yeah, there's just a difference. At that time, the difference from 50 years ago is that pretty much everyone in Europe and in the West thought Israel were great, supported them to the hilt. And now I would say that support is a lot less firm. People don't dislike Israel, but they are disquieted by some of the actions nowadays, as opposed to 50 years ago.
Yep, and that's about as far as we'll tread into the water on those matters, I should think.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Moving on. That was the news, and now we shall get into episode 2 of The Evil of the Daleks. Slow again, but the acting helps quite a lot.
Yeah, I really liked episode 2, actually. The Dalek in this is amazing. This is carrying on. This is Whittaker, right, isn't it? The same as Power of the Daleks.
Yeah.
So once again, he's written the Daleks perfectly here. I mean, arguably better than the dialogue of the Daleks is arguably better than Terry Nation's.
Oh, arguably, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a case to be made for Terry Nation here.
Oh, he did some good Dalek stuff, didn't he? Well, he invented the damn things.
While I do think that his stories are generally quite good, I don't think he has the same flair for dialogue that David Whittaker has. Terry Nation doesn't seem to have quite worked things out structurally as well as Whittaker does either. He just has really epic ideas that come off really fun.
I guess. I will say, I think the Daleks dialogue in the Daleks though is really good.
Yes, that is also...
that's the one I was mainly thinking of. I was drawing more parallel to the I should have specifically said that, to the original one, because they're not as good in his later two. The Chase, they're obviously rubbish in that, and the Dalek Invasion of Earth, they're not as good. But here, they are as chilling as they are in Power of the Daleks and in The Daleks, which are arguably the Daleks at their scariest. No, not arguably they are, that is when they are the scariest.
So there we are. We have a fight between two authors for competency of the Daleks, shall we say?
But it is still, we must say, it's not like with the Chase, Terry Nation feels like a completely different writer. Here, there is a certain honouring of the Daleks, and Whittaker isn't redoing anything. He's taking the core idea behind them and exploring it in a much more interesting way.
He's also following on from the lesson he learnt from Power of Daleks is use them sparingly at the beginning, and they're so much more effective that way.
And end in a big fight.
Yeah, very true.
Spoilers, but whatever. I mean, I suppose that's sort of a given. That's sort of how each Dalek
story resolves itself.
At least in the 60s, anyway.
I mean, if anyone's watching part 2 of Evil of the Daleks with this podcast, I mean, they have to know that everything's going to be spoiled for them. I mean, this isn't the best way to first experience Evil of the Daleks Part 2 by our summation and critique. So, if you haven't watched it for some reason, why are you watching this?
But please
Thank you for making the audience turn off.
No. So please carry on watching it. Ignore Luke. He's an idiot.
Thank you. Yes, your stay is greatly appreciated. Thank you kindly. Why don't we get into the critique of this episode? Yes, that's probably best. Kennedy is killed by the Dalek, which promptly leaves just as the Doctor and Jamie arrive at Waterfield's antique shop. They're lured by the genuinely new antiques and an 1866 cheque. Waterfield is forced by the Dalek to comply with its orders, which tires him so. The Doctor tries to learn more about the mystery from Perry, whilst Waterfield sets up a trap for the Doctor and Jamie using Kennedy's body, which knocks them out and allows them all to be transported away the same way the Dalek is. Goodbye, 1966. And that entire paragraph was the first 10 minutes. This story is a long one, and this is presumably why the episodes are, well, not to call it slow, just paced, shall we say. I'm going to
say that other than the bits about with the Dalek, what this also is setting up is Jamie's really even further developing his character. He's becoming more integral to the plot, and he's shown to be as he's figuring out, he's telling the Doctor, "Look, I know what's going on." He figures out that there's a secret room, and it's foreshadowing his later on in the story how he's going to be not necessarily agreeing with the Doctor on various things.
Going off and doing his own thing and making the story progress of his own accord.
Yeah, so here Jamie's becoming an even stronger character, which is really good. I mean, it's good that I would say arguably some of the probably as a contrast with Ben, who wasn't really a very strong character and didn't really affect much in any of the stories he was in. Here they're really making use of Jamie as this action character, and he can do stuff. It's good, and because we've lost the previous companions, the only companion character is Jamie, so the audience really needs to get behind him now. So it's good that they're making him more likable.
Yes.
What I find interesting about that, you say this is basically to characterize Jamie, because this whole sequence, when you think about it, is totally pointless. The Doctor and co find that Waterfield is from the Victorian times, and then they're transported to the Victorian times where it's confirmed visually. You could cut this whole bit. You who would cut this bit, but that's what's good. They are taking this time to develop their characters, and it's also this crossover period where the death of Kennedy sort of flows the crime drama story with the futuristic stuff. It's as though we're saying that these two worlds are starting to blend, and then we move into that futuristic world, by which I mean we go back to the past.
Yes.
We have that airlock period, so that tonally, when the tone shifts, it doesn't feel something weird and alien. It doesn't come out of nowhere, so we actually don't mind the sudden change, because pretty much the story completely changes at this point. 35 minutes in, it's now a completely new story, pretty much.
Yeah, Yoo-hoo would start the story here. The Doctor and companion land at a Victorian house where the Daleks are there and the daughter's been kidnapped, etc., etc. I feel the story is made a bit stronger because how sympathetic Waterfield is at this point.
Yeah, we've seen him the last 35 minutes, so we've got to know him as a character. And in the 10 minutes of this episode, we get to see that he's being forced to do this by the Dalek. So as you say, in you wouldn't get that. You wouldn't have this sympathy for him already, as you say.
Here we go to 1866 and all that, the Waterfield residence. The recovering Doctor meets Molly, who is definitely not the new companion. The Doctor also meets the terrifyingly eccentric Maxtable and discovers that Waterfield fawns for him, who explains slowly that they are working for a higher power, the Daleks, with Waterfield's daughter, the aptly named Victoria, as their captive, because why not?
So she's feeding birds. I mean, you don't see the birds on screen, but it's made obvious that she's feeding birds, and she's in a tower. So I'm thinking, well, they are introducing her pretty much as a sort of fairy tale princess here to be rescued by the dashing prince later on. So it's almost like a fairy tale analogue for the children.
Yeah.
And then I like the Dalek here is being very menacing, saying, "You must eat," which is not a thing you'd expect a Dalek to say, and it does it quite menacingly. And then when it says, "Stop feeding the flying pests," it makes the Dalek feel very alien. He doesn't know what pigeons are or whatever she's feeding the birds. I love how the Dalek is in this episode, or the Daleks. If I was a 5-year-old child, I might be scared, and they feel so alien.
What's brilliant about this is the Dalek is using statistics to terrorize Victoria. This puts him in a contrast to the scientists of the Doctor, Maxwell and Waterfield. He is, well, I say he, the Dalek is almost that inversion of those people.
The Daleks are using science for bad, and the Doctor, Maxwell and Waterfield. Well, actually, I wouldn't necessarily say that. The Doctor uses science for good, the Daleks use science for bad, but Maxwell and Waterfield are more, they use science out out of naivety. They're too naive for science, especially the explanation we get for how the Daleks came about.
Yeah, it's more the morally grey, which sets it beautifully within the Victorian time period we are set in.
Yeah, well, it's basically saying that humans, especially Victorian humans, are not developed enough to have such power or responsibility, which is quite nice.
The Doctor learns that Maxtable and Waterfield are those eccentric temporal physicists you get in this time period, trying to create time travel with mirrors and static electricity. The latter drew the Daleks to the house. Nice continuity there, because it brings the Doctor on to the Daleks. And the Daleks indeed forced the scientists to bring the Doctor to them, and now the Doctor is at the mercy of the Daleks. Said Daleks want to do tests on Jamie, which the Doctor is very reluctant to do, naturally. And finally, it appears that the Daleks want all the things the humans have that allows them to defeat the Daleks. This human factor. This scene has one of my favourite second Doctor lines, because it's played entirely straight, and it's almost hammy. What have you done with your infernal meddling? It's a beautiful line, because it actually even ramps up the tension. You foolish Victorian scientists. You have unleashed Daleks onto Victorian England.
Yeah. The thing I want to mention about this scene is, okay, so they're using static electricity and mirrors to do time travel, and I don't really... Whatever, that's kind of rubbish, but it's the 60s, doesn't matter. But how I like in the explanation of how they came to this idea, they mention real scientists and real science concepts that they were investigating at the time. And if this is 1866, James Clerk Maxwell and Faraday were still knocking about. They're still alive. They'd been doing their work in the 1840s, 50s.
I think we could partly attribute that because of Whittaker's groundings with the programme in its very early days, still having an educational message, and he's just used to adding that into the stories.
But that's great. Even though, as I say, static electricity doing time travel is a bit silly, but it makes it sound plausible. He's using real science in Doctor Who, but not in a way that drags it down or makes it boring. It's just, this is how you... real sci-fi.
Yes, grounded in reality.
Yeah, for someone who does physics, I really appreciate having real scientists mentioned in it.
Same here, as a non-physicist.
I'm just going to say no at this point.
Oh.
Well, you can...
Okay.
Tell us why.
Why did he bother going into such real science if he is just going to spout such nonsense? I mean, you might as well just said the arc reactor reverses the polarity of the magnet core of the Earth. I mean, who cares
because
at this point?
Luke, you can't have a Victorian scientist waffle technobabble that's from like Star Trek. That would be absurd. You can't go talking about protons or positrons. Those weren't even discovered in 1866.
Okay.
He's literally... This is as advanced as we were at in 1866, was electrostatics, mirrors, optics, things like that. We hadn't discovered particles yet. Atoms were as fundamental a particle as we knew.
Right. Well, that's interesting in terms of what I was going to say about the power dynamic and how Victorian science was sort of a gentleman's pursuit. And Maxwell comes across as that private benefactor who had the money to throw at these things because he thought they were interesting.
Well, he says as much. Precisely that line.
He's entirely the money, and because let's face it, if he was the brains, that would make no sense because he's completely insane. So there.
Yeah.
In looks and personality.
And
yes. So Luke, I don't see why. Like, that is the best technobabble you could do for Victorian scientists, so I disagree with your disagreement.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose they wouldn't know better.
As I said, the only science, the physics that they had then were electromagnetism and Newton's force laws. pretty much. They didn't have anything to do with quantum mechanics or anything to do with particles, microscopic stuff. They didn't even know that there was a galaxy or that there were multiple galaxies. They didn't even know the universe was expanding. They didn't know lots of things at the time. So
They're still locked on the question of evolution as well.
yeah.
Mm. It's a grounding which is mostly welcomed, shall we say? Yeah, so there. Jamie wakes and is given the eye by Molly, the gift of the gab by Ruth Maxtable, a vision of the future for a painting of Victoria's mother, and finally a blow to the head by a ruffian, only after he discovers it in 1866. The Doctor eventually discovers Jamie's kidnapping, which somewhat troubles him, as that means the Daleks might kill everybody, as the Doctor can't do the test without Jamie. But, of course, the Daleks say there will be no delay, so there. Dum dum dum.
So also in this scene, when the Doctor enters with Waterfield, the Doctor says, "That gas that you put us under was very potent," and Waterfield says, "Oh, it is an invention of Mr. Maxtable's." And it's at this point that we start to get quite scared of him. Personally, he starts to look less like this quirky benefactor and more like, oh god, why is he doing this? This is confirmed in the next bit where we see Maxtable talking with the creatures.
It's very much framed here as Waterfield is the sympathetic one, and Maxtable, well, yeah, he's, as you say, a bit
deluded, misguided.
Yeah, he from an audience point of view, you are a bit concerned about what are his motivations. He
is our Lesterson for this one.
Although I would say Lesterson was more sympathetic at least than. Yeah,
we're not going to get sympathy out of Maxtable. No, I can tell you that now. It's not going to end well.
Yeah. I will say at this point that he is one of my favourite classic Who villains. I think he steals every scene he's in for me because I just find
he
so
fills the entire frame every single time.
That beard.
Yeah. No. Oh.
All right. Oh, anything else to add?
This story is a continuation of a paced. Well, it's a paced episode. It's a paced story. It's now finished with its crime drama arc. It's gone to its proto-futuristic thingamybobs in Victorian England. It's set up the Daleks and what they want to do. It's set up the human characters behind the Daleks. One of them who's sympathetic, one of them who's totally not. And the stakes are significantly raised with the introduction of Victoria.
And it very subtly hints at possible, not ever totally mentioned on screen, romance between Jamie and Victoria. He already thinks that the painting of her mother, who just happens to look exactly like Victoria, is hot.
Wow. Okay. Sure.
You just say, "Oh, she looks beautiful."
Yes, that's true.
Something like that.
It creates an emotional connection, which we can pay dividends into, probably.
What I really like about this episode is how it's continuing the themes of the season, but it's inverting them for the Daleks, which is exactly how your main villain and series finale should work. In the 10th Planet, we had the Cybermen converting humans to become stronger. In the Underwater Menace, we had the fish people nonsense. In the Faceless Ones, we had the chameleons taking people over. And here, it's the exact opposite. The Daleks want to absorb us so that they can become stronger. In the context of Season 4, it's a chilling move, and so it puts the Daleks above any other sort of nonsensical plot we've had this season by building on it in that context. It's wonderfully done.
Yes, it's using the mantra, the context, the want to adapt and survive or thrive, which is what Doctor Who was trying to do and did 50 years ago. Thank you very much for watching. You can find us on Blogspot, which redirects to iTunes. Leave positive comments there, it helps. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube, where you can like, comment and subscribe, and Google Plus if you dare. We shall be back next week to test out episode 3 of The Evil of the Daleks. Until then, I have been Ben.
I have been Luke.
And I've been Nick.
Thank you, and goodbye. Doctor Who 50 years ago returns at the same time next week. And now, here's a rotten old YouTube advert.